All right, so I have about 20 minutes until I have to leave the house. So I thought I would just film a super quick video today talking about some Russian literature recommendations for the fall. Now, I really wanted to be picky with this video and include books that not only fit the theme, but that I genuinely love and enjoy and would recommend regardless of the season. So without further ado, the first story I've selected for you all is The Queen of Spades by Alexander Pushkin. And I also highly recommend this short story collection. It's called Russian Short Stories from Pushkin to Buida, and it's edited by Robert Chandler. It's a Penguin Classics edition, and this book was on the syllabus for the first Russian literature class I ever took in university, Russian short stories. And this is the first Russian short story I read. So why I love this? Let's see. Not only is this an iconic work that is referenced throughout Russian literature, it's 100% a must read, but it's just a lot of fun. So it's fantastical and fatalistic. There's an element of magic to it. Essentially, it's about this guy named Herman, who he's quite literally Herman the German. And he attends a card party one night and hears this guy brag about the story of how his grandmother basically cleared all her gambling debts because she learned this magic trick that would help her like win at this card game. And Herman becomes obsessed with this idea and with finding this grandmother. And so he starts courting the grandmother's ward, a woman named Lizaveta Ivanovna. And I wanted to share a quote. Let's see if I find it. Oh, okay, wait, there's a few. The first thing I should say is that Pushkin is known as the father of Russian literature because he was the first to make Russian a literary language at a time when the Russian nobility were all speaking and reading in French. And in the story, the grandmother, the countess, asks her ward to find her a novel, one that has no drowned bodies in it. And she responds, "Your kind of novel doesn't exist any longer, unless you'd like a Russian one." And the grandmother replies, "A Russian novel? I didn't know there were any. Send me some, old boy, please do." I guess she's speaking to her grandson, not her ward. And this is funny because there were no Russian novels, it's true, not till Pushkin started writing poetry and prose in Russian, and then inspired other people to do the same. Because that language was viewed more as appropriate for the church, the clergy, or even just like peasants. And then I wanted to share a quote about one of the main characters, Lizaveta Ivanovna, because I think she's such a pitiable figure, and I don't think I paid enough attention to her the first time I read this story 5 years ago. So the narrator says, "In society, she played the most pitiable of roles. Everyone knew her and no one noticed her. At balls, she would dance only when someone was without a partner, and ladies would take her arm each time they had to go out and set something right in their dress. She was proud, she felt her position keenly, and she was constantly looking around, waiting impatiently for a savior. But the young men, calculating in their flighty vanity, judged her unworthy of their attention, even though Lizaveta Ivanovna was 100 times sweeter than the cold yet immodest maidens whose favors they courted." Something that I want to highlight in this story is the importance of paying attention to time. So Pushkin plays around with this thing called fabula and sujet, and this basically just refers to there's a discrepancy between the order in which the plot occurs and the order in which the narrator tells it. So you just have to kind of keep your eyes peeled for that. And this is something I remember, like when I first read this story, being so confused by that exactly. And it's actually quite a popular thing to do in Russian literature, to completely play around with the order of events. And it's just a fun thing for readers to be on their toes about. I don't know, I think it's cool. And yeah, I talked about the fatalistic element to it. There's this sense that Herman is being pushed towards a certain train of events that he has almost no control over. And and he's described as a truly romantic figure. He has the profile of Napoleon and the soul of Mephistopheles. So right off the bat, you know that Herman is kind of a devilish figure, and you have to read on to find out if he finds out the magic trick about how to win at cards and therefore become a millionaire, or what exactly happens. But it's a super fun story, not too long. And then next, I also highly recommend this short story collection. It was also on the syllabus for that same class, and this is the Penguin Classics Portable 20th Century Reader, edited by Clarence Brown. And the story from this that I wanted to share with you, it actually feels quite vulnerable sharing, because this is one of my favorite, not just Russian stories, but stories of all time. And I read it 5 years ago, again in that class, and I haven't looked at it since. But that's because I think I was scared that if I was to reread it, I would find it less impactful than I did at the time. So you know when you try and like recreate a beautiful experience and you just can never quite get it right? But I read this last night in advance of filming this video, and it honestly moved me just as deeply. So it's about a 25-year-old man named Nikita who comes home to his village after fighting in the Russian Civil War on the side of the communists. And it's about lots of things, but mostly PTSD, trauma, depression. He comes home and finds his dearly beloved father, and they have a very sweet, wholesome relationship. But he also just finds that this town that he grew up in feels stifling, and things that seemed grand and wonderful to him as a child no longer feel that way. And he strikes up a friendship with a girl that he knew when he was young. So that's kind of all takes place right at the beginning. And this story takes place in the fall, or it begins in the fall and covers the span of a year. Something that's important to this story is the actual, did I say the title? This is the Potudan River by Andrei Platonov. And the Potudan River itself is an extremely important, almost character in the story. And this use of space, of a physical place, to also convey the passing of time, or a metaphor for time. This is called the chronotope, and it's a literary device that is often featured in Russian literature. So this river comes up throughout the story, and there's a lot of symbolism attached to it, which I'm sure you'll pick up on as you read. But yeah, this story made me cry last night, so go and read it. It's really quite melancholy and beautiful. Next, I had to include Chekhov, obviously, and once again, I recommend the Selected Stories of Anton Chekhov, translated by Richard Pevear and Larissa Volhonsky. So the story is called Sleepy, and it's only 3 pages long. Honestly, you can look this up on the internet probably. It'll take you 2 seconds to read, but it's about a young lady working as a nanny, and it follows a day in her life where she is forced to stay awake longer than is healthy for anybody in order to rock this baby to sleep. And she enters a sort of delirious mind state. And I find the ending of the story quite hilarious and grotesque and pretty eerie. And I immediately called my boyfriend after I finished reading it, and I had to tell him the whole plot, because it's just one of those kind of fun, funky stories that stay with you. And I also want to recommend to anybody who's learning Russian, this book, Reading Chekhov Stories in Russian, a parallel text Russian reader by Mark R. Pettis. He is a professor, I forget at which university, but I found this really, really helpful in practicing my Russian. And you basically have on one side the English translation, on the other half the Russian, so highly recommend that. Next, I, of course, also had to include a short story by Dostoevsky, but I didn't have to. I chose to include this. That's important. and it's called A Gentle Creature, or sometimes it's translated as The Meek One. There is absolutely nothing autumnal about this story. It doesn't take place in the fall. I simply thought that it was really creepy and scary, and so it might be a good fit for October. It's about a girl who's abused by her husband. It's narrated from the husband's perspective, and it opens with him describing her dead body lying in front of him and how he feels guilty for her death. Yeah. And I think this is the last one. This is The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. This is a work of historical fiction set in a Russian town in Kievan Rus, which was back in the day, you know, the original Russian Empire. And it follows the life of a little girl named, I think it's Vasya. And basically she's the only one in her family who can see demons and spirits. There's a ton of Slavic mythology in this book. That's basically what it's all about. And although I think it's marketed as being for adults, like I would give this book as a gift to like a young preteen, teenage girl. It's very readable, super easy peasy, but enjoyable. I went on and read the sequel to it. I think it's more wintry maybe than fall, but I don't know. I think that fantasy is always really fun for fall, and you can kind of get in the spirit of make-believe that this story really, really encourages. So yeah, and then I was debating touching upon a few works that I feel like fit in this theme, but I didn't want to include. And now since I started talking, I might as well mention The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. That's an obvious choice because, I mean, it has witches, a witch, and a talking cat. However, why torture yourself this October? I simply would not recommend it. I read that book once was enough. I'm just kidding. I'll probably reread it at some point, but basically that book has like two halves to it. So half of it is this really fun, funky plotline of the devil coming to Moscow and stirring things up, and there's just chaos and people lose their minds. So Moscow becomes the city of like madness, and that's super fun. And then the second plot line is about the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And you know what? The symbolism wasn't lost on me, guys. I understood what Bulgakov was trying to do there. However, was it enjoyable for me to read? No. But if Master and Margarita is, for whatever reason, on your to-read list, this is an excellent time to get into it. Same with Dead Souls by Nikolai Gogol. This is another iconic work of Slavic literature. It's referenced in absolutely everything. It's kind of a must-read for any introductory class. And it's about a guy named Chichikov who goes from estate to estate asking people if he can buy their dead souls, which basically means like souls referred to serfs in Russian, basically slaves that are attached to the land. And it's just as absurd as it sounds. But it takes place in what is likely the fall. It's a very dreary atmosphere, and he travels around in a troika, like a carriage. So that means that it was either fall or spring. You can take your pick. I think it was the fall. So if that's been on your to-read list, give it a go this October, November, whatever. However, for the average Joe, if you're not looking to specialize in Russian literature or become an expert on it, you can skip this. I won't tell anybody. Your secret is safe with me. Yeah. All right, that's everything. Hopefully I am not running late. And yeah, thanks for watching. Take care.